Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Ninja Nagora. Today, we're kicking off a series of mental health issues. We've done one previously on parental alienation. Now we want to focus on youngsters and students going to university and starting their life in university, just about to leave school. So a very big welcome to Dr. Sonakshi Rahela.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, we're very well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. It's a pleasure hosting you. So again, as I say, we want to chat about general mental health and the well-being of our youngsters. So they face pressures that I didn't face at school. You know, the advent of social media, much bigger expectations in this part of the world as well than there was where I grew up in the UK. And when I look at social media, I see some really dark postings, and it's quite scary. So you know, there's quite a hint of depression there. It seems to me, and so I wonder, why is it that so many people get depressed? And I don't know if you mentioned this in your book as well. I'm sure there's some area of it. So could you explain that to us?
See, if you see a general or a generic phenomenon, I think the reason that people fall a lot into depression these days is because there is multitude of information that they don't know how to believe. They don't have a very strong coping mechanism because investment in sometimes professional and personal self is so high that we ignore the most important aspect, which is the social life.
Right.
And so we don't have a very well connected mechanism of people around us who we can rely on, we can fall back upon. And I think most of the times our lives are so fast that this quarantine anxiety and this COVID, it just put a brake on the accelerated way of living that we were doing. And so most of the people had that self-reflection. It's like something that just hit their face so hard that they didn't realize how to go about it. And only then a lot of these things about depression, anxiety, number of cases going up, intolerance in people. I see so many people who tell me that, well, we love our parents, but we can't live with them.
Right.
Or I love my wife, but I can't stay with her 9 to 5. So, these kind of insights we heard about people and we heard from people, which I think is, is a fantastic insight to the society to understand that we are bringing up the best of the people with the worst of the imperfections.
Right. Yeah.
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 I think though, even before COVID, I noticed. Well, you see, I worked in China, then I worked in Saudi, and when I came to Dubai, I noticed there seems. Okay, I think it was then that I sort of got into social media because part of my job is keeping in contact with them and being available for them, and so it was through this that I noticed there was so much darkness there, and so I think COVID's probably highlighted it, but it was definitely under the surface. So leaving COVID out of it for a minute, what are the main causes of anxiety and depression?
I think the main causes of anxiety and depression in people are one, a very strong inability to understand what they want, what they need, and what are they getting.
Right.
So for example, if I don't have a 2,000 dirhams in my pocket and you offer me 1,000, I would be more than happy. But my worth is a 5, let's say.
Okay.
So if you see, in a way, I'm compromising on situations. I'm compromising on, my own set of values because I'm unaware.
Okay.
So most of our lives, we are living on an autopilot mode, if you ask me. So the main reasons for anxiety and depression are very high expectations of self, primarily, very low vision of self, very little idea of exactly how I want to go. So directionless in youth, existentialism is a huge concern. A lot of people are having a lot of existential crises these days because they're unable to understand exactly what is the purpose of why I want to live.
Right.
Then Inability, intolerance is increasing quite a lot, which creates a lot of anxiety. Multitude of options. We have so many options available. I mean, I see a lot of university students and they come for career counseling. Unfortunately, in UAE, I feel the career counseling concept is not as high as it is in the UK or in India, even for that matter. A lot of people come with, I don't know, I want this also, I want this also, I want this also, but I don't know, I'm not sure. So the constant I am not sure, I don't know how I feel, I don't know how I think, these kind of things are on a rise.
Right.
Another thing, one of the most common things that I see in my clients or my students is this amazing overthinking pattern. This metacognitive thinking. Like
Mm.
they're stepped out of the house and they're constantly in that thought process, even while driving, sometimes, or even when in the shower. The awareness of I'm in the shower, I'm going to enjoy my bath is so much less in comparison to, oh my God, I have this pending, that pending, cooker is there, this is there, lights are on, lights are off, hot water, cold water. So we are not in the moment.
Right.
So
Yeah.
organically, we have conditioned ourselves to believe that we are not good enough, we have to catch up on a lot of things that we are unable to catch up on.
Right.
And these are primarily the reasons for anxiety and depression amongst especially the youth. I feel they're very, very lost. They're very directionless. They have too many things that they want to do in too short a time. So
Right.
they're losing on life like sand, and they don't even realize it.
So
These are the comments.
depression and anxiety is on a rise
Yes.
in the last 10 to 15 years. I also see a lot of, in students especially, copycat kind of characteristics. Do you think that is something that they are acquiring from media? Is it trendy to be depressed? Or or as you say that we seem to be lost and we have all of these issues, then where are these issues coming from? And are they like across the board? Are they everywhere? And what is it exactly at the core of it?
I really like your question, I must say. The most important factor is that we are vulnerable these days.
Right.
Can you see my hand here?
Yeah.
Now, this is normalcy of mood. This is sadness, depression, dysthymia. Dysthymia is total no movement, no motor movement, because your mind is so occupied. Now, in between sadness and depression is a very thin line. Now, if I'm normalcy of mood, you give me a chocolate, you give me, something that just escalates my mood, like a cup of black coffee. I would not want the second cup. I would not want the second piece of chocolate because I'm in normalcy of mood. But the moment I'm in sadness or I'm in depression, you give me chocolates, I can gobble on it. You can give me ice creams and I would not even know the taste of it, but I will still eat it. That's the situation of vulnerability. And why are we vulnerable? One of the most important things we are vulnerable is because we don't know about ourselves. Right? It's like I throw a stone in the water to want to check the depth of it. And I realize, oh my God, my stone is lost.
Right.
So that's what's happening here with the population. Their rising vulnerability has to do a lot with the in general competitive society, has to do a lot with parenting. Sometimes anxious parents make anxious children. Has to do a lot with the inability to communicate what we actually think. So we think, but our speech is not connected. So thought speech coordination is very less. So the pace at which we are thinking, we are not able to speak. So what happens? Where do their thoughts go? They make us vulnerable because we keep thinking about them over and over again.
Right.
So that's the reason.
Okay. Now, one thing I also noticed, especially amongst females, is scars on arms and self-harming. And I spoke to one student about it, and she said that it's trendy. And it seems to me like they're pushing the boundaries of pain to see how far they can go, and it's almost like it's become the norm. So how do you sort of differentiate the norm from what reality? Because the norm might not necessarily be reality. It's just what people are doing. But
and if I could add to it, is that an attention-seeking mechanism that they turn to with self-harm?
It could be an extension to attention seeking, but it's not necessarily attention seeking. what Al said here is something which is interesting. The concept is that my threshold of pain,
Mm.
I am increasing.
Mm.
Like a lot of people like tattoo, but then they go berserk with liking tattoo.
Yeah.
And then we ask them, you got the first tattoo done, how is it? Oh, it was really nice. You got the second one, you got the third one, you got the fourth one. But by the time you reach the fourth tattoo or the third tattoo, you don't feel pain
Right.
because you're used to it.
Yeah.
Because you're used to it.
Yeah.
So likewise, people make themselves used to the idea of self-harm,
Okay.
to the idea of I'm not getting any fun in life. So, this seems to be, I have an excruciating pain. I'm unable to bear it. I am unable to tell anybody that I'm unable to bear it. So let me just try this little bit and see how it affects.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's about developing a pain threshold, developing your idea. For example, I'll give you a very simple example. I met across a student back in India. And, the student came to me and said something very interesting. He said, ma'am, I just want to get my nose pierced. Oh, I said, oh, that's wonderful. You like nose piercing? No, I don't like nose piercing. Then why don't you want to go? Why do you want to do it? Well, the girls in my college that I want to really hang around with, they have nose pierced.
Mm.
So I said, okay. So I said, do you understand that's peer pressure? So this is the statement of the child. The child said, yes, but this pain of actually drilling my nose to have a nose piercing is lesser in comparison to sitting alone in classes.
Well,
So now you understand the psyche that it's absolutely okay to give up and understand a certain pain just because I want to. My mental pain is so high that physically it doesn't really account for. I'll tell you something important here. If you're ever sad, if you're ever depressed, and if you're ever anxious, it's almost like I always say, it's almost like driving, a car in the Indian roads. You're so practiced of driving. Anybody can come from anywhere. You duck, you drive, and then suddenly I ask you, listen, which gear are you driving at? And you'd be like, I don't know. But you're driving a manual car. You just put the gear. Which gear is your car on? You are conditioned to driving in adversity. You're conditioned to driving in dysfunctionality. And so it is naturally okay for you to, just, not remember things.
Yeah.
So when you have pain, even if it is a pain as much as self-harming, you don't remember it because you're used to it.
Now, another issue specific to our context here is that like students, they go through a lot of financial pressures. So there is parental pressure to do well and to get into universities and do well at school as well and achieve. And on the same side, they battle with financial pressure. They don't know if the parents will be able to pay the next fees or not. So do you have a lot of students coming like that to you with that kind of an issue? I mean, they're not able to get into jobs already, and then they have their parents saying, maybe you should work yourself and support your studies. That causes a lot of harm to them. So
yes, definitely. But it's a two-way sword, One way of it is, how should I say it? I'll give you a very simple example here, Faiza. Our bodies, we are protected by, or our antibodies are, let's say, WBCs, which is white blood cells. So your body gets protected by the WBCs. So that's your physical immunity. Likewise, we have a mental immunity. Any level of stress can have a two-way thing to us. One, it could condition us to maybe work harder and be very focused and understand this is what we want. Or the other way to it is saying, oh my God, I think this is the end of it. You're right. In the last maybe 8 years or so, we hear more men and women say, I think I'm done with it. I have students who come to me at like sometimes 9 o'clock in the morning and say, ma'am, what am I going to do through the day? Like, I'm done with it, can I just pack up and go? But it's 9 o'clock in the morning. You have to go attend your class. Yeah, but I can do that. Google is my best friend. So, but what about human interaction? What about sitting in class, talking to people, having, ma'am, same things, same people, same conversations. So sometimes you understand that's an escape. As a faculty, I know that's an escape.
Okay.
So when you ask about financial pressures, I can say yes, there are students who suffer from financial pressures, and it's all over the world. It's not only here. Like this time, bringing COVID here, there must be many graduating students who would have dreamed of either, going to a university in the UK or the States, or taking admissions here somewhere, or Indian students who wanted to come to UAE to get this done. And, unfortunately, the scenario is such. So, yes, there are a lot of children who come with financial strains. They talk about it. Unfortunately, I think this is the time that there are many other engagements that people can do to keep their sanity and not lose it. Because, and another thing I want to add here, something very interesting. Financial deficits is one thing. The other flip side to is financial management.
Right.
Do we know how to use the money that we have in our pockets? Who teaches our children to financially manage themselves? I don't run a course, I know I run a course for a segment of students who teach, who are into finance, international finance, or bachelors of commerce and economic students. But what about the rest of them?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. I think all the universities and schools should run financial management classes as well. It's very important.
At an
Yeah, I agree
early
with
age,
that,
yeah. I have
Yeah.
a question for you. So, I'm thinking more about this context again. Is it taboo to get counseling? And do you find students hesitant to come to you because their parents tell them you are fine, don't stay depressed all the time, we don't need this? Do you face that?
It was a taboo.
Okay.
It is a taboo, but we've come a long way from there.
Mm.
What is, see, till the time you put your, head under the water, you're breathing, you're enjoying in the swimming pool, it's okay. The day you start to have trouble breathing and you're suffering, you will immediately pop up the water. That's exactly what is happening with people. When they have not been able to find any biological causes for why children are caged in one room, doesn't want to step out. Like I see a lot of children who have been in their rooms for almost 2 years and 3 years. Their only activity is, getting to the restroom, coming back, social media, sleeping, eating. And so parents find it so difficult to draw that child out from the, room and say, you need to step out. Please, you need to step out. And they know that biologically there is no concern. So the only concern, because there is no biological, is psychological. So now people from all stratas have started to walk in and talk about, I think, madam, can you do something about it? Or gender differences. For example, at one point of time, a woman would knock the doors on the counselors way more. But if you ask me, it's a role reversal. So today, more men come to therapy.
Yeah.
And more men want to seek what is, wrong with them. Unfortunately or fortunately, the shrinks, as they call it, or the psychologists, as they call it, are shown in a light where they're introspective. With this, those are gone. Those are gone.
Right.
Now we have people. If I had my way, believe me, both of you, I would run something called as a campaign called, Vent Your Heart. You can just come, sit, talk, go.
Yeah.
And 90% of the people will feel better. I have seen this. I've personally experienced it. I've had anxiety patients, depression patients. They come, they're jittery, they want to talk. They my table is shaking, everything is shaking around me, and I'm comfortably sitting. And I said, why don't you have a glass of water? So by the time they have water, biologically, physically also they cool down, and mentally also they settle. And then now let's talk.
Right. Got it.
So it's very important, to understand that talking helps.
If we're talking about sort of school leavers and university students, academic achievement is obviously one of their priority, not only for them but also for the parents, because the parents are obviously paying for this. We've spoken about the finance. So how would a child speak to their parents if they were underachieving at university or in school, and the fact that that there could be a failure on the cards?
How would the student speak to the parents?
How would they approach
Do they get too anxious about it because the parents are paying for the degrees or the schooling?
Yeah,
I
this usually.
Sorry, I'll tell you why I asked that, Sonakshi, because I've had a student come to me and say, I can't tell my mum and dad. You know, so please don't tell them.
Yeah.
You know, so if there's that pressure, how, for example, if we were talking about that student, how would they tell their parents that obviously they're anxious? And so, you know, what's the best way of broaching it?
I'll give you a simple example, not related to fee structures here though. I have a student, very, very conservative background, but she was very passionate in doing something about suicides. Now, she wrote an excellent paper. I was thoroughly impressed. I said, I want to publish this paper. She said, no, you publish it, ma'am. You're my guide. You publish with your name. Don't put my name in it. So I said, why? No. My Abba will not allow. My father will not allow. You know, I mean, I cannot do this. I mean, he will think that I'm reading some really nasty things on the net. You know, and I can't. And I have gathered so much information. There's so much review of literature here. I cannot. Please publish it on your name. I said, I'm not going to publish it on my name, and I want this paper published. Even if it publishes in India, I want it published. It's a good paper. You've written a very good thing. I said, I give you a week's time. Go speak to your father. After a week, I'll speak to the editor to wait for a week and we'll publish your paper. No, every day for 6 days, I asked her every day, did you speak to your father? No. Did you speak to your father? No. What happened? I went in the door. He was praying. I came back. I went to the door. He was having dinner. I came back. I went to the door. So I asked her, when do you see your father in the day? So she said, I see him only after 10:30 when he comes back. Because, you know, he goes early. He goes around 5:30 to work and comes back at 10:30. So I said, where does your father work? And she says, Alain. So where do you stay? So we're in Dubai. So he travels to Alain every day? Yeah. Okay. When is the best time you can catch him? What does he like? He doesn't like anything. How is that possible? He must be liking something, right? No. He doesn't even like my ammi. What are you talking about liking something? He's a very, you know, and she went on saying, no, he's not, he doesn't like anything. She spoke to him. And the next thing I know is I get a call around 11:30, 12 o'clock from the father on my phone. That, you know, what is this? What are we talking about? How can she publish it? And then I said, have you read it? And, you know, it took me quite some time to speak to him. And he said, okay, we trust you. Let's do this. But if anything happens to my child, then. And the paper got published. After the paper got published, I got like a, you know, sweets box from him on my table saying, don't publish next one. You know, it's okay to publish one, but I'm not going to still allow her for the second one. So it's not so difficult to approach. Face it at one go. It'll be easier.
Speaking of seeing yourself in the mirror, the next question, we want to move away a little bit from education, but sticking to youngsters and adolescents. Body image is very important to them. And nowadays, they see photoshopped pictures of their idols on online, and of these models or actresses, and we have filters on our phones, and you know, there's so much pressure to look good. So how do you think that youngsters deal and tackle these issues?
It's important to understand that we are dealing with body image issue in a very wrong way, because in body image issues, we are only addressing the body. We are not addressing the mind. Your body image issue arises from the fact that your mind says you're not good enough, and somebody needs to validate you to say you look good.
Yeah.
So but body, yeah.
How do you get into that mindset where people? It's like when you say to someone, "Man up," you know, or "Grow up," or whatever, you know. Get a grip of yourself. You understand, you know that you have to get a grip of yourself. Sometimes you understand that you have to man up, if you like. And we all understand that we're all different, and beauty is different in everyone's eyes.
Yeah.
But the levels that we're or that youngsters that I feel need to get to or push themselves towards. How do they get it into their heads that they don't need to do this? Because we all know that we shouldn't. So how can they stop doing that?
Especially like you were having a conversation like about washing hair or not with yourself, you being actually a counselor and a psychologist. So how can we actually help these youngsters, and how would they know these skills?
Yeah. One most important thing that I would say here is, first of all, conditioning to judgmental attitude from a very early age. That really takes a step, that really gives us a set of instructions on how the society look and how you need to look at a society. Number two, borrowed wisdom and stereotype from parents who are at the threshold of, are we conservative or are we modern? So their confusion is borrowed by the child. So it's a complete borrowed wisdom. When a child is born, the child does not know good and bad. The child relates to the mother and the father by the smell of their body.
Once we've got that on board, say for example, we're talking about kids that have adopted this from their parents. Their parents are stressed. How does a kid deal with coping with that stress? Say for many of the kids I speak to are not like the kids that were at my school. It was a very happy time for us, and they don't seem to be happy anymore. So how do they snap out of or how do they help themselves out of the depression? Because I know it's not something that you can snap out of.
Yeah, we call them kids, young adults, actually.
They are young adults, It's because I'm so old. They all seem like kids to me.
Yeah.
Old is in the mind, as they say.
Yeah.
So I understand that you're trying to get to the root cause. What is how this root can be dealt with? A very simple example of that is, if the student is able to identify that they have certain strengths that work in their favor. In fact, each student who will either look at your video, or who actually is struggling with some concerns, I will give them 3 things to work with. Number 1, write down from 1 to 10 in the order of most important to least important your set of priorities in life, which is very important. For me, my set of priority is to become a good psychologist. Then I am not moved by even if you're a millionaire. That's not my priority. My priority was to become a psychologist. And somebody told me psychologist has money. Somebody told me psychologist does not have money. It doesn't bother me. I want to see my name as Dr. Sonakshi Rohela, psychologist. Khalas. So it's very important for us to know what are our priorities. Number 2, core beliefs. What is my belief system? If my belief system is, that happiness lies within, then if somebody tells me that happiness is available in Burj Khalifa, floor number 128, why should I take a ticket and climb? I will not. Because for my core belief says it's within. So each student needs to understand what are the things that they believe in. The only person you got to expect from is you. So this brings us to one very important concept. Be aware, to all the students who are facing this concern, be aware of the little things around you. You will appreciate them. You will be so grateful that there are things that happen. You sleep with the confidence of getting up in the morning. That confidence will come through the day. If you see things around you.
So nicely said.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap up with this question. I hope it's not frivolous. I think it's kind of serious. We see trends and clips on social media, TikTok and things like that, doing dances or whatever. But we also see daft things like the Tide Pod challenge. Eating the Tide Pods, the sort of the washing powder capsules, and people die through this kind of thing. And we all know that people die through this kind of thing. And still, the parkour thing, the dangerous hanging from buildings and things like that. And they know that this it could mean the end of their life. So what is it that drives someone to do something like that? And can you do anything about it?
See, there are 2 ways of looking at it. One is the fact that somebody has an adventurous streak in life which is not getting gratified. So you want to do X, you're not getting gratified. You want to do Y, then Z, then A, then B, and you want to grow from there. So this streak of I'm not getting satisfied, I need to do something more, sometimes pushes people towards dangerous things.
Right.
There are only two people who do accidents, huh? The ones who are underconfident or overconfident. So this whole concept where you are doing this, you're doing it mere for the fact that you want to try something. You could be a person who likes to do these adventurous streaks, and you can risk it all. At the end of the day, you need to ask yourself: is it worth it? Was it worth it? And how can you deal with this situation? When you don't have anything to look forward to, you will create nonsense in your life. So the mere thing that you need to sit down and think, what do I want? What are the things I need to look forward to in tomorrow, will help you keep you distractions, your how do I say, the norms, will keep you in norms, which is very important. I will also tell you the role of vigilance here. Yeah, very important. If you don't mind, and if we have time, I can share a simple example here, but it will open the idea for us. I had a girl come to me. She was about 12 and a half years of age. When she walked into my therapy room, this is again back in India, I saw that she had blue marks on the face. So I knew she was being beaten by somebody. When she sat there and I asked her, I said, what happened? And she said, I want to speak to you about something. This is very personal. And I said, have you come? Because she was dressed in the school dress. I said, have you come by yourself? And she said, I have a boyfriend. He studies in a university. He's about 22 years of age. He bought a new bike. He said, let's go for a drive. We went for a drive. There were two people who crossed our bike. They appreciated the bike, but he thought they said, I've said something to them, or I've instigated them to give some comment. He stopped the bike and he started beating me on the road. And then when people tried to intervene, he said, my girlfriend, she's my girlfriend. I can do anything with her. So I said, okay. So after a little inspection, I said, what is your expectation? She said, can you please tell my boyfriend that even if he wants to beat me, don't beat me on the road. He can beat me in the house. But it's very embarrassing to be beaten on the road. And I said, so look at the self-esteem of the child, rock bottom. And then I said, you've met your family. What have you said? I mean, what have you mentioned? And plus, I was very worried how the child is, she's paid the fee and she's entered my therapy room. So how has she managed the fee payment and how she has managed the whole thing? She said, no, both my parents are international bankers. So when I come back home, they're not there. By the time I go off to sleep, they have night shifts. So they go at night, they come back in the morning. So I said, this blue mark came to you when? She said, 2 days back I had a fight. So I said, your parents haven't seen? She said, I haven't seen my parents. I will see them over the weekend. And so for a week, the only people who know about this. So I said, who are your companions? She said, I have a servant who cooks for me. I have a dog. I have a servant who's being just kept there to take care of the house, and I have a driver. So these 3 people and 3 dogs are my companion throughout the week. So I said, okay. So sometimes we need to understand, and for me, I understand that because she has nobody to say, I love you too, the moment she walked out of the house and the first man, even if he's a nice man or not a nice man, walks up to her and says, I love you. She started to believe. And now, I don't know how old would she be. I think I met her in 2011. Her complete idea of romance and love is ruptured because it is meant that you are to be beaten. Beaten is love. So when we do things which, now she's adventurous, even if she elopes with her boyfriend tomorrow, or even if she runs away, cuts herself, or she in fact told me in the therapy room that I can do anything to prove my love to him. I said, what is your definition of anything? Anything. I said, give me your definition of anything. And she said, well, anything. So then I asked her, and she said, I don't mind having an abortion for this man. So I said, okay. So I understood that the psyche of the person is I can do anything to be here and feel this at this point of time because I'm not loved.
Mm.
So people want to feel a certain way and therefore they do these kind of things.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the solution to that is that get your priorities very straight, and parents, get your vigilance high.
Mm.
It's very important that the connect. I have parents come to me and say, Madam, I have excellent relationship with my child, but why is he celebrating when you go out?
Yeah.
You see the difference
Yeah.
in perception.
So
Yeah.
communication is key, you would say, from the parents.
101%.
Yeah, I know.
101%.
Yeah, I know when I was younger, I used to do some crazy things. We'd drive at 130, 140 miles an hour everywhere. It's because I thought
Yes.
it was invincible.
Yeah.
Death was the furthest thing from my mind. It's never going to
Yes.
happen to me.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand it a little bit. Yeah.
So,
Go on.
all right. No, I had a question about your book. So recently you published your first
Yes.
book, which is
Yes.
for millennials, actually, and it has been translated into several languages as well. Could you tell us a little bit about it? What do you touch on and what drove you to actually write for the millennials? And what are the different issues around it? And where is it available so that the audience can know too? Yeah.
Thank you so much. So my book started with how I approached my, dissertation during my doctorate program. I wanted to do only counseling. I was very clear in my head that I don't want to be a clinical psychologist. I want to be a counseling psychologist. And in counseling, I want to look at relationships.
Right.
Yeah. So that is what I wanted to do. When I started writing the book, it just, I started doing therapy, I started meeting people, I started to notify that they have some commonalities. So they do have certain things that are, common, whether it's depression, anxiety, or distress. And the most common of that was psychological distress.
Right.
So the journey was starting with distress and slowly moving towards depression, sadness, depression, or starting with distress, moving towards anxiety, hyper anxiety. So it was happening. I think I will call it a fortunate launch that after COVID, I was able to produce this book and say, this book, which is interventions for millennials, basically is a book which you can, read and understand that these are depression, this is anxiety, this is distress. What are the behavioral definitions? So this book is quite inspired by Jongsma, I must mention. He's the one who's given the psychotherapeutic process.
Mm.
So I've picked up those psychotherapeutic process. I've used it on an Indian population. Then I have added it to it, and then I produced this whole booklet. Mm-hmm. Now, if you are a naive, innocent, or if you're a beginner psychologist, you can get that book, understand that if these are the symptoms, then this is the disorder,
right,
or this is the counseling need.
Mm.
Then these are the long-term and short-term interventions that you can do with your clients or on yourself. And these are the counseling treatments that you can do. So it's like a manual. It's a progressive manual to basically dealing with anxiety, distress, depression, and all your social and emotional health issues. This book is now produced in 9 languages. And I want Arabic also, because the foreword is written by Dr. Hiba Shatta, who's a quite popular figure here in UAE. She's also the founder for Child Early Intervention Medical Center in Maharat Learning. So she's a dear friend. She wrote the foreword and she told me, why don't you produce it in Arabic? Because my friends would like to pick it up. I said, cool. So then, I'm trying to make it in Arabic also. So it's in 9 different languages as of now, and you can purchase it on morebooks.com, or you could wait for another week or so. It will be available on Amazon.
Yeah. So actually, it's been fabulous talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and for handing us your experience on a plate. It's wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was lovely. It was lovely, and thank you for the opportunity. And I would love to love to meet you guys sometime. So just let me know, and we'll catch up virtually, or if generally also face to face. I would love to. So pleasure talking to you.
And you too. Take care of yourself.